All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Really excited to have you. And we have an amazing guest for you tonight. So hopefully you prepared some questions, which we'll be ready to answer at the end. So just pop them in the comment section or just keep them until the end, and we'll make sure to answer them at the end of the session. So let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Anna Buldakova. I am a CEO and the co-founder at Meander, which is a mentorship platform which helps you to connect with mentors from amazing companies like Google, Meta, LinkedIn, and essentially help you grow in your career or transition to a new one. And today we have an amazing guest, Thiago Gizzi, who is a director of engineering at Nubank and previously worked at Apple and ThoughtWorks. And I was particularly inspired by his series of posts about the future of careers and how careers are developing. And he's also writing a book, which is super exciting. So hopefully he will share more about that as well. And I just could not ask him to join me to discuss all those exciting questions. So, hey, Thiago.
Anna, thank you so much for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here. Career in general is a topic that I love, and I can spend hours and hours talking about this. So pleased to
Thank
be
you
here.
so much. Thank you so much for joining. So everybody who is joining us, please just say hello to us in comments and share where you are joining us from. It's always really interesting to see the geography of where people are coming from. And just do not hesitate to say hello. We love to see your comments. And just in terms of the logistics, we'll just spend the next 40 minutes just having a conversation about transitioning to people management, thinking about career changes, talking about how the approach to career planning is changing and what you should expect if you are in the middle of your career and trying to figure out the next step. And then at the end, we'll leave 15, 20 minutes for your questions. So hopefully you will have them in the comment section as well. So let's dive straight into my questions. So maybe, Thiago, you could share a short intro into your career journey so far, and maybe just highlight the pivotal moments in your career.
I'm originally from Brazil. I think, like, in terms of, I try to stay at the pivotal moments. I think, like, I'm a little bit over 15 years into my career, but if I had to pick maybe a few of the moments that I had like big shifts, I think one was when I got my first job as a programmer. So after like a year of being an intern, and one thing that's important to mention is that in Brazil, a lot of people actually are able to work and study, do college at the same time. So I was one of the lucky ones that I started my career really early on, like when it was like 19 years old. So I think that was great experience to work full time and to kind of like go to college in the evenings and weekends. So that first job was amazing. Then the second, let's say, pivotal moment I would say was when I moved to a bigger city. So I'm from a small town in Brazil, and I moved to a bigger city, and I got a job into a company that I loved, that was ThoughtWorks. And at the time, my English was super bad, and I was lucky enough to be able to fake my way to the interview process and get a job there and move and start my life, I would say, kind of like far away from my parents. And I think that was when life actually transitions and I start to work with people from different parts of the globe and start to speak English in the day to day, work on like super big projects for international clients. And that opened up my mind to so many other things. And then I would say the last one, and probably there are a few other more, but was when I moved to New York. And I actually have a post about this, how I moved to New York by mistake almost. Um, and I think like if I had to pick another one was when I transitioned into management and when I got my green card in the US after like 7 years of struggling as an immigrant. So I think those are some of the key moments, and there are a lot. there's a lot more that I could go into.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely would like to dive deeper into your transition into people management. I just will stop for a moment to say hello to people joining us because I can see quite a lot of interesting cities. So we have Warsaw, Toronto, Kazakhstan, Podgorica, Moscow, Belgrade, Sochi, Ukraine, Canada, Brazil,
Nice.
London. Istanbul, Armenia, Georgia. Oh, amazing. Such a wide geography. Hey, everybody. So yeah, I want to get back to this transition from an IC to people management because sometimes this happens almost sporadically in people's careers. Like when they're doing a great job as a product manager or as a software engineer, they just get promoted. But from my experience, I actually felt like people management was really different from my day-to-day as a product manager. So can you share more about how it was for you? Like, was it a conscious decision? How did you approach it? What was it like to become a people manager?
Yes. I would say it was almost by surprise, but I think I would say on the day to day, I was already acting as a people manager and I was already doing a lot of the things that managers were supposed to do. But I was working. So when I moved to New York, so to tell you a little bit about my transition, right? I was working for a startup, like a really small startup, like maybe you had 30 or 50 people max. And we only had engineers. So we had like maybe 10 full stack engineers, one PM, and one CTO, right? And I was helping like on the interview process, interviewing other engineers, helping to talk to external vendors. I was like facilitating meetings on topics that other engineers felt was boring, such as processes like bug reporting, like things that in general, like engineers are not super excited about, right? So I was like working across and in my view, just doing the job that needed to be done and helping the team, right? I was on this company for 3 years and then I was kind of like exhausted. Startup life is really tiring, and I moved to a bigger company, American Express, in that case. And then there, I joined as a senior engineer. But there, people were completely shocked. Like, why are you facilitating this meeting? You're an engineer, right? Why are you preparing this document for this, right? Uh, and like 2 months in, and my manager at the time announced that he was leaving, and I was invited by the director of engineering at the time to become an engineering manager of a pretty big squad at the time. And I was kind of like surprising one side. It was like, wow, I was planning to transition to people manager at some point in my career, but not now. I'm just onboarding, right? And then I took on the challenge and I think made my life way easier. I think like overall, because when you are IC and you're working, doing managerial stuff on the side to help, right? But you're not formally the manager, you have a lot of additional responsibility and you still have to do your IC job. You're still expected to. So that often means that you are working extra hours or trying to balance because the other ICs that were your peers, right, are not doing all this extra work. And whenever I became a manager, it felt like naturally because I was already doing that most the part of my day, and people were already like asking me to help them on these issues. And so it was unplanned, but I think that's the thing that I say to folks that ask me that they want to become managers, like just start acting and behaving as a manager and doing things that managers do. And there are plenty of opportunities, right? With interns, with small projects, there's a lot of opportunities for leadership that we all have on the day to day. And management, I think a big aspect of management is leadership. Right?
That is such a great point. I think a lot of people are just waiting for this kind of to be given to them. Like at some point, someone will notice how awesome I am and will just give me the management position. But I feel like if you are showing this high agency, this initiative approach, then you already will start doing the job, and it will come natural to you when you become a manager.
Exactly. And you also want to have the experience of like really seeing how it is doing that on the day to day, right? You don't want to go from a 0 to 100 in one day, right? You want to go like slowly and getting feedback, see where like you like, where you don't like, where you're good, where you're not good. See, I mean, where you can add value, I would say in general, right? And if you're already doing, and you only need a formalization of the role. That's the best case scenario. And the same applies to promotions, right? Promotions are the best when they are basically, oh, I thought this person was already that level, right? Like, what? This person is not a senior yet, right? Like when you have those, like almost like they're already acting as one that most people believe they're already at that level, right? That's the best scenario. It's not always possible, and there are many other problems with this, but if you're able to have that like progression to be seen and to act as before and to have some exposure, I think that's always the easiest path.
I think right now you are also writing this amazing book called Career Abroad in Tech. At what point you became interested in career development? So obviously, when you are a people manager, you kind of have to be interested in career development, but it seems like on your side, you have a much deeper interest in that. So could you tell me more about when it became your almost a passion, I would say?
Yeah, that's been since forever. I don't know exactly when I start to really be in this topic of career and growing as, I mean, career as a profession, I would say. Um, I can definitely relate to uncle that I had that was really inspiring to me and had a really interesting career and also in tech. And that was in the early days of tech in the 90s, right? But and at some point, the only thing I know that is that people start to ask me to talk to them about career, right? And when I said, I was like, yeah, I love this topic. I can talk about this forever, and start to go deeper and deeper into this over the years, like reading pretty much every single book I could find on career, right? And like talking to my leaders about this, and learning different organizations, and trying to understand HR and the different ways that different companies apply like the career paths, right? The other thing is because I move abroad, I moved to work in a different country because of my career, and I have seen how much that has allowed me to grow as a person, right? That has inspired me to talk to other people that did the same, other Brazilians, and before the pandemic, I was actually interviewing a lot of successful people that had careers abroad to try to understand the patterns and what they did and the idea of the book. And I think I released like a pretty big blog post on this on LinkedIn about that has like pretty much 80% of what I have planned for the book is how to see your career, how to grow, what are the things that I found that are common, like among those people, right? The main reason, like why I was like doing this work was to try to help people to move abroad and to get better careers to because I believe that by doing that people would be able to impact more, right? So some of the insights that I got, I would say that is one that is kind of obvious, but I feel is important to mention is that I found out that like all those people that move abroad and let's say had those big career movements, right? They always had some taste of that before. Like by that I mean like either they had traveled to the country that they want to move to, either they have worked with someone that they really admire that worked like was already working at that level, and then whenever they moved, whenever they got a job abroad, right? That was already something that they were like planning for in the background for years, right? There was already,
Mm-hmm.
so like in all of those people that I interview, I could like pretty much in every single case see like this person already talking about this position that they want to be before they got there. It was not by accident, right? There was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of planning movements. I would say the the other thing, like there is like a general framework, and that's more on how to analyze the different levels and how you can grow in your career. That's the four P's, and
Mm.
especially for folks that are in tech, that's like the model that I have seen, especially for engineering, I would say, for managers and ICs. So that's a framework that I still use to this day to try to evaluate, okay, what dimension should I focus now? Should it be the platform? Should it be the product? Should it be the process? Or should it be the people? Because I feel
Mm.
that if you focus on those big elements, right, there's always something to optimize and always some area that's going to give you more leverage than others. And that also can be applied as a product manager, right? Like, I mean, as a
Yeah.
product manager, you need to understand the people side. That could include stakeholders, could include other other teams that you have to work with, right? That could include processes, include the platform, like meaning, okay, what are we doing, like in terms of like things that are going to be leveraged for years here, not only like what is above the surface, but what's below
Mm-hmm.
the surface too, right? I would say, I mean, in general, the other common thing that I found is that it's all about impact and influence, right? The more your impact, the more you influence, the higher usually is going to be your level and your career growth, right? So that's what like I feel successful people go after. It's not after
Mm-hmm.
titles, right? It's not after promotions, but is after bigger problems to solve, different ways to influence, different ways to have a broader impact on their, let's say, like their small squad, on their organization, on the, let's say, on the industry as a whole. Like I think there's always different scales that you can operate.
As you touched on this 4P framework, maybe you could give like a quick overview of this framework and what those 4P are. You have an amazing post about that, so I'll attach it in comments. But maybe you could just give like
Yeah.
a 1 minute overview.
Yeah, so the idea of this four piece, it was like when I first became a manager, my director at the time, once he mentions, and I mentioned this on the post, is like once he mentioned that, okay, like if you look on the scope of responsibilities of engineering manager or a director of engineering, you're looking at six P's, right? At the time, it was like I think like people, process, platform, partners was additional one, and
Mm.
paperwork was another one. It's like so he was like he basically gave me his way of like, okay, if I had to categorize my day to day as a manager, as a director, as an executive, whatever, you can bucket those things into six pillars almost, right? And you have to prioritize to decide, okay, where I'm going to allocate most of my time, where most of the problems are, and then like reflecting on that over the years, I kind of like I came up with that is not only a thing for managers, right? That is a thing for ICs as well, because I saw a lot of the ICs that were really good on the platform side, on their particular discipline, right? The fastest engineer you can find. They're the best debuggers you can find. But if they didn't actually understand the product, the business side, right? If they were not able to deliver projects, they're just talking engineering by engineering and trying to make engineering an end and not a mean to an end. If they didn't have a good way to mentor people or to even help people overall, they would always fail. And processes are also a way to help ICs not manage this to scale, right? It could be to come up with a process to have different like pull request reviews or to come up with RFCs, right? And I noticed that the ICs that were more looking at the 360 and not only focusing on the discipline as the only thing that they should care about, they were the ones that were growing and having like bigger impacts, right? Helping to
Mm-hmm.
solve bigger and bigger problems, and ultimately, like kind of like having more influence, right? Because they were not only the best engineer, they were the engineers that understood the PMs, that could talk to other, let's say, vendors, or could help a particular process to be fine-tuned to improve the overall process for engineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that also applies to product managers or other even roles in tech. If you actually look, you need to have a really strong foundation on your discipline, what I call your platform, your core, right? But if
Mm-hmm.
you don't look on the product side, I mean business process, on how you scale as an individual and as a team, right? As governance or other things. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't also have a way to talk to people, mentor people, not necessarily manage people also, but also facilitate meetings, have really tough conversations, right? Give feedback, right? Those things end up kind of like not being on the radar, right? So it's easy for you to stay only on your core discipline and not look on the surroundings.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And I think as large as the company is, the more you have to move away from the platform side and the more you have to focus on especially the processes and the people, because
Yes.
you have to work with other people, you have to communicate, and soft skills sometimes become the key blocker for someone to get a promotion.
Yes. And I think like there is another thing is like after like a certain level, you actually have a lot more leverage by supporting other people's ideas, right? And using your, let's say, your goodwill, your the credit that you build over the years in the organization, being at certain level to sponsor those people to like make it easy for them to solve problems, right? Then to be the one that is coming up with ideas and trying to implement by yourself, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of like how much leverage you get, right? It's like, yeah, you can do a lot of things by yourself. You can be super productive, I see, but doesn't matter how productive you're gonna you have a cap. Even with all the AI, all the things you have today, you're not gonna be as powerful as having 10, making 10 other engineers or 10 other PMs more effective, right? And like sponsoring them, helping them to like to have that sense of ownership and like creating a culture, creating something that's able to scale. So I think that's and that applies on the management track as well as on the IC track.
I think right now, as you touched on this concept around AI, I cannot not ask you this question about how you think this might affect the future of work. But I think this question is relevant not even with regards to OpenAI advancements, but in general, like every single year we have some new technologies, we have some new changes. So how do you stay relevant? How do you make sure that your skill set is not getting outdated, and just making sure that you, when you're coming to search for a new job, you actually can demonstrate something that is actually in demand?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, like one part of the answer I would say is like if you focus on this surrounding areas, right? People, process, and the business itself, I think like you're gonna be able to connect things that is gonna be really hard for ChatGPT or for like, and there is the human element that always comes to play. But I think the other side is like you need to leverage those tools to be more effective, right? Like, and it's amazing on how quickly you can do certain things with those tools now. So like you need to embrace it, right? Like and be familiar with them, like, and even I can definitely see how someone that stays resistant to this is gonna have problems, but I don't
Mm.
see a problem when you're embracing these new technologies and trying to be more effective, trying to use that to make your impact bigger, right? How that
Mm-hmm.
is gonna be bad for your career. I think it's just gonna give you more leverage in the long term. And like to be honest, I think in technology there are a lot of things that can be done much faster now, like with those tools. But I would say the core of the problem is still not being solved by AI. That's like collaborate with people, understand different people motivations, like the whole thing about soft skills and how you influence, how you help people, right? Like is and I mean, I feel like on the other side is there is a limit of how much those tools can help, and your expertise is like the tool by itself alone is not powerful. You need to have some
Mm-hmm.
expertise as the glue to use those things. So it's just that you have to grow your impact as much as possible, leveraging those tools and embrace them as soon as possible. I think that's the thing that I see, and the thing that I try to do is like if you stay relevant, I I don't see this as a problem at all.
Yeah, so essentially understanding the problem to solve with those tools and trying to see how they could make you better in solving those problems.
Yeah, I don't have any strong opinions about why this can be bad for your career. Kind of the opposite. I see we doing a lot more things a lot quicker with those tools, like projects that took years, especially migrations and things that like are the perfect case for some of the LLMs that we're seeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it is amazing what they will help you to achieve, right? And how quickly. So it's like let's do that the same way that we already evolved over the last maybe 20, 30 years. Like if you see internet was a big lever, I don't see why you should not invest into that.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. In that regard, do you think that it makes sense to specialize in something, or should everyone now become a generalist? Essentially, I think previously there was a clear distinction. Like some people preferred to specialize and go really deep on some technologies, and some people would be just acquiring this transferable skill set. So, do you think that this kind of separation would make sense in the future? Or do we still have a space for specialists as well?
I have a strong opinion on that topic. I mean, like engineering wise, I feel that everybody is better off, at least in my experience, like starting as a generalist, right? And having like going into different parts of the stack and actually like building projects that force you to go to different areas than like focusing on one thing and trying to be the expert on that one thing. Uh, I mean, I would say especially now, I think like there are a lot of use cases for experts that are kind of like that. I would say in general, I would be a lot more worried if you were like an expert now than it was more like a full stack, right? I
Hmm.
think with the especially with the support you have on tools and how quickly you can learn things, how quickly you can like start to put things together. I would say the understanding of the basics, like is the I on the article I mentioned about the Pareto principles, like it's almost the 80-20, right? It's like ideally you should understand the 80% that the like or the 20% of a skill of an area that deliver 80% of the results and then move on. And then after doing that for a couple of years, then you can say, okay, there is a lot of things that I can do on this area. Let me go a little deeper and start to see your career almost as a Tetris game where you have skills, right? Skill blocks, right? And you start
Mm-hmm.
to accumulate, but you don't want to have all the skills on only one corner of your skill shape, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're able to leverage AI tools to be the glue and to learn things quickly, I think like being more like a generalist is much better for your career. And it doesn't mean that you cannot be an expert or like being expert is bad. I think there are areas that are in need of experts, and like there is also not going to be a shortage of expert anytime soon. Uh, but I think you have to be careful for that, because if you only know one area, it's much harder for you to relate to other people. Probably it's much harder for you to scale, right? It's much harder for you to relate to the day to day and to be able to see how your work impact other people. So I when I see someone that's like 10, 15 years working on a particular with a particular technology on a particular part of the stack, it always kind of like raises some flags. Like, how is it possible that after 10 years you have not reached to a point of diminishing return where you are not seeing like the growth or your learning kind of like get stuck, right? So I have found that in myself. If I 2, 3 years working on a particular part of the technology with a particular language, whatever it is, I always get to a point where I'm seeing myself doing exactly the same things and solving the problems the same way and thinking the same way, and it's way too comfortable to keep doing that, right? But it's an illusion to believe that you're growing at the same speed, right? I think you definitely can be growing, but I think that's diminishing over time, and I think is is a thing that's more beneficial for your career, especially if you look in the long term, to have a really strong basis at the beginning.
Nice. Yeah, I think this point really resonates with me. Imagine that I'm graduating from university, so we just talked about the generalist path as a beneficial move for people's careers. So, what would you say, like, if I'm just a recent graduate, how can I build the foundations for my career to be successful in the future? So, what else would you recommend to think about when I'm just starting a career?
I would say, like, okay, whenever you start your career, I would not be that worried at the beginning, but I would be like on a constant evaluation of your next move, right? Like, is every year, every 2 years max, you need to force yourself to interview. You need to like always be looking for your next job, right? And use like some time to prepare to get there, and use the opportunities you have in the current job to kind of like explore the different skills that you need for the next 40 years of your career, right? So, I mean, I would say if you're like a recent grad, I think the first thing is try to get a job on, I would say, if possible, on a startup or a company that you're gonna have exposure to a lot of things. You're gonna be able to interact with customers. You're gonna have to like use open source. You're gonna have to like almost see as much as possible the whole like how like is like a real production system running, like how is the real product. And you want to avoid, I would say, to join a big company and work on a tiny area using internal technology, and like constrain yourself really early on into a particular super niche thing, right? You should try to find more broad opportunities, because I feel that even though you can sometimes get paid more if you go on a super niche early on, long term, that's bad. That's bad because I think you have less options, because if you only know one thing, it's hard for you to be productive or to be able to quickly transition. And also, if you want to be an entrepreneur, like a freelancer, whatever it is, right? It gives you a lot more optionality long term. So that's why I'm a big fan of like having experience on a startup early, or on an area on a big company where like you have that kind of exposure, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I would say. But I think that the big reminder is every year and a half, 2 years, interview, see where you are, see what kind of salaries you're able to get, what kind of opportunities you're able to make it through, right? And then decide to move or not based on that, right? Is a way to be constantly seeing how relevant you are.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a great point. And I think definitely leaving Facebook and then starting a startup definitely feel really connected to your last point because obviously in a large company you have all the tools already at your disposal. Some of them are internal ones, so you don't get to experience all the variety of tools on the market available to the average customer. And I think that's where you can actually discover a lot of interesting problems to solve and a lot of opportunities for growth as well.
100%.
I think another question in terms of career growth is obviously this transition from an IC to a people manager, because at some point, I think everybody starts thinking, how can I get to the next level? And how can I unblock the next level? And obviously, people management, that is something that comes to mind. And I feel like right now, majority of companies are only seeing this growth through people management. So how do you feel about that? Like, do you feel that this might change in the future, where people who want to grow won't need to transition into people management, or it will stay the same?
I feel that that has already changed. At least during my career, I have seen the transition. I have seen the formalization of the two sides of the career ladder in most companies, right? And the companies that don't have that, right, usually are companies that are losing talent because it's such a big thing for the company and for the people that are there, right? So, um, and I don't know exactly when that started, but like maybe 5, 10 years ago, it started this movement to have like the career path doesn't end as a senior IC. You have a path to staff, principal, or like, and I think the same applies to product or design or the different disciplines, right?
Yeah.
And management is a big option, and I think like there's a lot of opportunities there. But I would say in some cases there are actually less opportunities there than you have on the staff principal path, right? Because as a manager, like once you get to director, like you have such a big scope that's like, okay, like it's impossible to have, let's say, 100 directors in a company, right? Because you don't have a scope that's big enough for director, right? Uh, for staff and principal, depending on how the company are growing, you can have a lot more depending on the kind of problem you're solving, what kind of expertise is needed for that company. But yeah, I see that in a super healthy way, and that formalization of those letter and those different roles, what is expected of a staff engineer, staff product manager, versus like what is expected of engineering manager, senior manager, are completely different things, right? And they are super complementary and allow people to focus on different parts of the problem and to be super effective together. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, in general, I feel that's a really good movement, and I see more and more companies adopting this, and less companies not having career ladders, right, or like levels. I think if you're like, unless you're a really tiny startup, like there are models that are available and there are examples, and I think it's never been easier to actually formalize that.
Awesome. So we are gradually coming to the last part where you guys can ask questions. So please share them in comments while I'll ask my last couple of questions. But in the meantime, Tiago, I think in one of your talks you mentioned this new definition of success in careers. Could you talk a bit more about that? Like, how do you see this definition of career success evolving, and what it is to you right now?
That is like, okay, when you look on career success, right? Most people feel, okay, is your job title, is what level you are, is the money you're making. But I feel that one thing that is missing is like is not only what do you want to be, but is who do you want to be, right? And who you
Mm-hmm.
want to be is more than just the title or just the level. Is like what kind of problem you want to be solving, how you want to be solving that, with who, right? How you want your day to day to be, like how you want to be recognized as, and I think that is like it's not only the impact, but it's like what kind of impact, right? It's not only the influence, what type of influence you want to have, right? And that's why I focus on the impact and influence being a proxy. But I think it's like going much deeper than just career ladders, levels, and oh, you are on the management track, on the IC track. It almost doesn't matter. Right? It's like you need to find something that is unique to you, right, and leverage your skills, and you help people like, and you're doing something that you always also feeling that you're growing, right? Having the impact you want to have, unless attached to a particular company or attached to a particular title or to a particular technology. Um, you want to be recognized as individual, right? Not as a title.
Yeah, 100%. And to be honest, I'm seeing more and more people being excited about doing some meaningful work and, doing something valuable rather than getting like a title, which doesn't mean a lot of things. Awesome. So we have some great questions that I can see in comments. So let's look into that. So a great question from Andreas. Do you have any recommendations for preparing to transition from manager to manager of managers?
Yes, we actually did a podcast on that. So I also have a podcast called Engineering Advice You Didn't Ask For. And we actually did a whole episode on this exactly topic, like how to transition from manager to manager of managers.
Nice.
And
We'll share the link in the comments. So
yes, but I mean, overall, I feel the same principle applies. It's like you need to start to acting as a manager of managers, start helping. Like maybe the first step is help to onboard a new manager. Like, okay, once you consolidate yourself as a manager, what is the next thing you can do, right? It's like, okay, whenever you see a project that is struggling, go there and try to help. Whenever you have opportunity to onboard someone new, go there and do that, right? Uh, Try to connect with your peers in other areas of the organization, right? Like it is more to find. You need to find different scopes that you might grow. You might need to like be a really good people manager, right? And help your peers to, let's say, to build up promotion cases for their people, to help whenever there are cases of low performers. I think like is like what makes a manager of managers is the people management side. I think that's such a core, is like to be able to give feedbacks, to be able to help others to do that. And you can do that informally first, because once you become a manager of manager, you are going to need to do that on the day to day, right? And you also need to find ways to make things happen, to unblock initiatives without being you being the one that is driving the work or is doing the whole thing, right? You need to like to get really good at mentoring, and I think the same applies to the other four P's. It's like you look at the other manager of managers you have in your org and see what are they doing on ways to have process to scale themselves. What are they doing on, let's say, on the on the platform side? How much involved they are? How much further are they looking? Like, are they thinking for the next quarter, the next semester, the next year, right? How much time are they allocating each one of the dimensions, right? But I would say mentoring other managers, new managers or managers that are onboarding, helping them with people challenges, and seeing different scopes and seeing ways that you can like help your organization to grow, your business to grow, I think is going to build a really solid case for you to become a manager of managers.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have a great question from Dmitry. Which is better, having a lot of experience but being less active, or having less experience but being more active? What is valued more in large companies?
I would say I cannot speak to all large companies, but for the large companies that I work at, the problems are the same, right? The problems are exactly the same, and usually is because lack of proactivity, lack of people that are volunteering to do things, people that are waiting to be told to do things, right? So I would say less experience and a lot more proactivity is usually better, much better, because you easily gonna get to the level of experience and you can learn quickly, right? But the behavior side, right? Even if you have a lot of experience, but you're not proactively doing things, you're not looking things holistically, is a lot more challenging to change, and is usually something that, I mean, after let's say 5, 10 years, you get to the point of diminishing return, right? Like, so if you're really expert today, you're probably not gonna keep it up as being the expert for the next 2, 3 years, especially if you have someone that's more junior but is doing more things and trying to grow. Of course, there are cases where having someone with like a lot of experience and not a lot of, let's say, activity, like proactivity, can be much beneficial, especially if you have a big problem ahead of you that's like really complex. But in general, organizations, small or large, lack like proactive people. Like, and usually I'm not looking at if you're junior or senior or staff. Like, there is always room to have more people like being proactive and doing more things or looking things more holistically. So the managers don't need to tell people, "Oh, why don't you do this?" Or like, I think it's like they have the sense of where they can contribute, and they do things in the background without anyone telling them or asking them to do, right? Is the whole high agency thing. It's like the feeling that they have is like, and over time that like builds up really quickly.
Yeah, and I think it also helps to build trust with your manager, because if they feel like they can rely on you, you quickly become their go-to person for important projects.
Yes, that's actually another point for the previous question, right? Like, if you are able to, like, another way to become a manager of managers is like to start to ask for more or seeing areas that your current manager is struggling, either because they don't have time or because like they don't have the skills, and offering to help, right? And gaining more and more influence, right? I think that's another way to be considered the next manager of managers, because if you start doing that, you're gonna open up more opportunities for your manager, right? And your manager is more effective, is able to have a bigger impact, they're usually going to grow their org, they're going to grow like how much projects, how much impact they can have, right? So make your manager more effective, make organization more efficient are usually ways that are going to reward not only you, but the whole organization, you consequently, I would say.
Awesome. We have a great question from Arthur. So do you think working almost full-time on a pet project while working for a big company is a good idea? So the big company is to make money, the pet project is to grow and enjoy.
I would say yes, and I mean, side projects are a great way to grow and to play with different technology and to see what's out there, and to kind of like to bring innovation to the workplace. And I would say the only thing that I would be concerned about is like, is a pet project that doesn't have a clear goal, right? Like, um, I like the idea of like small bets and like trying to launch those projects, trying to solve a problem to someone else, or to actually have some accountability for those side projects, right? I don't like the. I think it's good to have some pet projects for a while, but if they become like a pet project forever and they are not, let's say, they don't have a clear focus, that we start to get to a point where you're gonna get to the diminishing return as well. But I feel that's a great idea. For example, if you want to be an entrepreneur, right? To have a side project, to be doing something, to be testing your ideas, to see how much you can do by yourself, right? What are the pain points if you were to open your own company, right? And for engineers, I think is a great way to bring innovation to the workplace, is to grow their skills, right? To I think is like putting a few extra hours on a side project is going to open up your brain to a lot of different thinking that if you're only working on that company, only doing the 9 to 5, you're definitely gonna have like a big leverage.
Yeah, I think the caveat in this question is Arthur is suggesting working full time on a pet project while working at a big company. So I wonder if it might lead to a burnout at some point.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, then there is another point is like, okay, if you're working full time but keeping working on a big company, is like, why are you doing that, right? Because
Yeah.
you're just wasting a lot of your energy, like trying to keep your job on a big company. And I mean, yes, salary wise, benefits and all that, but like, why don't you find another job that's closer to what you're doing on your pet project, so you don't have to keep doing something that you don't like, right? But I think it is a tough question, and it's like the situation will vary a lot depending case by case.
Yeah, for sure. We have another amazing question from Jorge. Some companies request that you're still a top programmer, but being a manager involves dedicating most of your time to coaching people. So sooner or later, you don't have time to stay technically up to date. So how do you handle that?
Yes. So, I mean, the way that you stay technical as a manager or as a director is by proactively being involved in things that are gonna force you to. Like, for example, like one thing that I do at Nubank or even my previous companies is like always be close to, for example, production incidents, or whenever there is a big RFC, like a big change on the architecture. Uh, like on my one-on-ones, I use some of them to go deeper on problems, start to recognize patterns, right? I like once a while, once a month or so, I set up the developer environment on my machine and try to do something, right? Try to debug some problem. Um, I would say like you stay technical by like trying to help your team be involved in some of the issues that they're seeing and helping them to prioritize, like, and trying to explain like how you believe something works to an engineer, and you get a lot of feedback there. So you don't need to be a top programmer. And the other thing that I mentioned to managers, like there is this model called C4 model. That's like the 4 C's. That's like you have the context, you have the containers, you have the components, and you have code. If you actually see the systems, the platform that you work into those 4 levels as a manager, you don't want to get to the code level, you don't want to get to the files and understand what's up. You want to stop at the components or the containers level, and just by understanding, okay, what are the big responsibilities of the system, what are the bottlenecks, right? What actually broke that caused this issue in production, right? Why are people spending way too much time to do a simple task and get deeper and deeper, but not that deep that you need to be the one doing the work, but you're the one that's asking questions and you're seeing patterns and your work more broad, right? And I think that way has been enough for me to stay technical. And of course, once a while I need to build a pet project or something with new technologies, right? To actually get a sense of that, or to try to fix a bug or to try to debug an issue by myself. I would say those are ways that managers can stay super relevant technically.
Awesome.
And if you have like a strong foundation, I think like if you go back to if you have a really solid foundation, you work in different parts of the stack, you build your engineering level to kind of a solid level, it should be easy enough for you to kind of see patterns of problems and see, oh, this is similar to this kind of problem that I did when I was a C programmer. This is similar to like the problems that I was seeing when I was a mobile engineer. Because a lot of things in tech are more layers of abstractions building on top of layers, right? So you're always able to relate to problems you see even like 5, 10 years ago. If you're able to unpack that onion and find your connection through, that's usually a really good way to stay relevant.
Amazing. And I think we have time only for one last question. So I'm seeing a really good one from Dmitry. How do you how can you I understand if it's a good manager or a bad one? So what kind of skills or qualities you can look at to make this distinction?
Yes. So I feel like a bad engineering manager is easy. Like a bad manager engineer is easy to tell because usually you're gonna see people problems, you're gonna see delivery problems, you're gonna see, feedback problems, you're gonna see collaboration problems, right? Or you're gonna see technical problems too, right? Like manager needs to stay technically relevant to be able to connect the dots, to be able to represent their team in meetings. And if a manager that is like that anti-pattern, right? If a manager needs to bring someone of their team to every single meeting, that they need to talk a little bit more technically on that discipline that they work for years. Usually you have a potential problem. Of course, there are things that are super hard and there are managers that have a super big scope, right? And a good manager is like kind of the opposite, right? Is like someone that's proactively, let's say, addressing low performance, is someone that is promoting people, helping them to figure out what to do next in their careers, is someone that is like opening paths to collaboration, is like raising problems even when they are super at the beginning, right? Is not someone that is uh, hiding problems, right? Is someone that's proactively giving visibility, is someone that's raising, someone that's escalating, like is someone that's escalating problems. Usually a good manager escalation is not a problem, is actually is a feature. It's not a bug, it's a feature, right? It's something that you should use to be more effective. Of course,
Yeah.
there are bad patterns on how often you use and how you use the escalation process to be more effective. But yeah, if you look at the 4 Ps that I talk about, you can easily tell, okay, what a good manager is doing, what a bad manager is doing, each one of those dimensions, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Iago. That was an amazing conversation. I learned so much. So hopefully, guys, you did as well. Please share in comments your favorite insight that you learned from today. That would be super, super helpful for us to understand what you enjoyed about this conversation and also help Thiago with maybe ideas for his next posts. Thank you so much, Thiago, for joining and sharing your wisdom. That was amazing. Wishing you the best with your book and the next publications.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good evening.